you. This is for all you ladies out there who like a bargain. And this is called Buy One, Get One Free, girls.
Hello, I'm Charlie and welcome to another episode of the Time Traveller Diaries. Now today we're going to be covering the brutal murder of Mary Bax, which took place on August the 25th, 1783, although some people think it took place in 1782, but we'll be clearing up that discrepancy in this video. We'll be going to the site where the murder took place, we'll be unveiling the identity of Mary Bax's killer, we'll be covering the trial which happened afterwards, and also we'll be discovering the fate that happened to her killer. So without further ado, let's get to the locations. Now this is the Deal to Sandwich Road which Mary Bax was walking along on the morning of the 25th of August 1783, which was a Monday. Now it's unclear as to whether Mary Bax lived in Deal or Sandwich, but most of the information suggests that she was walking to Sandwich from Deal rather than the other way around. Now sadly, because there's no photography at the time, we don't know what Mary Bax actually looked like, although we do know that she was 23 and she was often referred to as being beautiful. There doesn't seem to be much history of her family either. All we know is that her father was named John. Now this building is the Checkers Kitchen School, but back in the day when Mary Bax was murdered, it was known as the Halfway House. Of course it isn't the original building, but this is the location where the Halfway House was originally situated. Now Mary was continuing to walk along this road along her way. It's documented that she was carrying a bundle, but nobody knows what that bundle contained. And it was when she was walking past this building that she was seen by her killer, who was sitting on a nearby bank. Mary passed by this building and her killer began to follow her. I should also briefly mention that this building was also used in an episode of the TV show London's Burning, although in the show they claimed it to be Little Hampton. I'll try and get a shot of that on the screen for you now. And this is the spot where Mary Bax was tragically murdered. Her killer stole the bundle that she was carrying, the contents of which aren't known. He was also found shortly afterwards asleep in a graveyard in Dover, still clutching the bundle that belonged to Mary Bax. Some people suggest this was actually in Folkestone, but when you listen to the killer's confession, which I'll read later on, you'll realise that the evidence heavily suggests he was sleeping in a graveyard in Dover. Now, horrifically, this murder was witnessed by a young boy by the name of Rogers, who was only between 10 and 12 years old. He hid behind some bales of hay nearby, and as soon as he witnessed the killing, he immediately raised the alarm. Now, as you can see, you can't really read anything that features on this memorial stone. So years later, this sign here was placed, which apparently is a copy of the wording which was on the original stone, which says on this spot, August the 25th, 1782, Mary Bax, spinster, aged 23 years, was murdered by Martin Lash, foreigner, who was executed for the same. Now the year here seems to be wrong because Mary Bax was buried in St Peter's Church in Sandwich, Kent, and according to the church register she was buried there in 1783, not 1782. Now this memorial stone and sign are completely tucked away. Check out the undergrowth behind me. It's completely and utterly secluded, although it is a wonderful day. And now we'll go on to explain about Martin Lash, who was a 27-year-old Norwegian sailor. I'll explain a little bit now about him, and then we'll go on to read out his confession and the trial and what would be his ultimate fate. Well, Martin Lash's surname is actually pronounced Lars because it's Norwegian. Now, following his arrest, he was taken to St Dunstan's jail in Canterbury to await his trial. And during the trial, he had no remorse whatsoever for the murder of Mary Bax. He mocked the court. He even insulted the witnesses. And when the guilty verdict was read aloud, he cheerfully rejoiced and cheered 3 times. The judge was so outraged that he ordered Martin Lars to be chained to the floor in his cell. I'm now going to explain about the confession of Martin Lars, or Martin Lash. When he was chained to the floor in his cell, he was visited by religious people. And when he was being taken to his place of execution at Gallows Hill, he was experiencing a journey that would last around 30 minutes. And at this point, he was actually quite remorseful and seemed pretty tearful about the whole thing. And he went on to make a final confession in which he said, between 11 and 12 o'clock on Monday the 25th of August last, I was sitting on a bank near the halfway house between Sandwich and Deal. The deceased young girl, Mary Bax, passed by me on the road, upon which I soon afterward got up and followed after her. I let her get about half a mile from the halfway house and then I accosted her. I first said to her, "Which is the way to Sheerness?" And she said, "Oh, you're a long way from Sheerness yet." And then I said, "Am I?" She said, "Yes, that you are." I then said, "Well, I haven't got any money." And she then said, "Well, I haven't got any either." He further goes on to say, then I said, "Well, I must have some form of somewhere to bear my expenses." She replied, "I have none to give you," I said. And he replied, "Well, I must have some." And soon after I pushed her into the ditch and then jumped in after her. The mud and water was up to my middle. And then I took the bundle out of her hands and the shoes from her feet. And I made off through the marshes to Dover. I threw the shoes away and soon after getting out of the ditch. And the clothes I hid in a bush near to the place where she was taken. I was told some years ago by an old Spaniard that I should commit the murder and that I should suffer for it. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Rest in peace, Mary Bax. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Check out some of our other videos. You might enjoy them too. So please subscribe to the YouTube Diaries, the Time Traveller Diaries on YouTube, and check out our Facebook page. And we'll see you next time on the Time Traveller Diaries.